Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Well-Rounded Saxophonist, a podcast that aims to provide valuable information to young saxophonists and music students in a digestible amount of time. I'm Owen Robinson, and today I will be interviewing Walter Blanding, professor of jazz saxophone at Michigan State University. For those who don't know, Professor Blanding is starting his second year of teaching at Michigan State, and we couldn't be happier to have him. Blanding famously played in the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra and has worked with many esteemed musicians and bands such as Wynton Marsalis, Roy Hargrove, Illinois Jacquet, Wycliffe Gordon, and the Count Basie Orchestra, and many others. Professor Blanding, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Owen. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So the first question that I wanted to ask is, anyone who has spent time around jazz musicians knows that the word language gets thrown around a lot. Each musician has their own unique voice, yet each style of jazz seems to have its own unique collective language and rules. How do you practice your own vocabulary on the saxophone?
Wow, that's a good question. This is a language of jazz. It's just like any language, English or whatever. By the way, I speak also Italian, Hebrew, Spanish, and my Chinese is kind of beginning. I spent a couple of years in China. So interestingly enough, when I compare those things to the language of jazz or any type of music, it's something that has rules, just like you learn the alphabet, you learn grammar, you learn things in order to speak, and then you start to learn how to express things, and we do that by studying great poetry or great writings of some of our favorite authors and artists of the time. And language develops through time, so those rules start to change. If we take English as an example, our first teachers of the language are our parents. And so even though a child may not know when an infant is born and mommy says, "I love you," the child has no idea what that means, of course, but we know the feeling and we know something good about it. And we start to imitate our parents until we get to the point where we start to say things that we want without thinking about theory or logic. We say, "I want my bottle. I'm hungry. No, I don't like that. I want to play. I want more sugar." Those types of things. And so when I think about practicing the language of jazz and developing my vocabulary, I use it in exactly the same way. And so I've been playing for about 46 years now and still learning. And that's so beautiful. The beauty of the complexities of jazz keeps me humble. And having a sense of appreciation for everyone's individual ideas and their own identities is important. So when I learn things like the scales, or arpeggios, playing etudes, transcribing solos, all these things are comparative to learning the alphabet, learning grammar, imitating your mother and father. And so when learning the language of jazz, definitely one of the most important things is to make sure that we're learning from the people who created the music. For example, if you take that same baby and they learn things like, "I love you," that is considered positive. But if they were to hear things like "I hate you," that might not necessarily be something that could be constructive, although it's still a part of the English language. And in that way, when we listen to people like Louis Armstrong, Charlie Parker, Stan Getz, John Coltrane, and the list goes on and on. All these are creators of the music. And so not to put a bad emphasis on anyone specifically, but only for the sake of understanding the clarity of who created the music. If we were to listen to someone like, let's say, just for example, Kenny G, not to say that he is a good or bad musician, he has a right to do what he wants to do. And so the respect goes to each person for their individuality and their right to express themselves. So I don't want it to be confusing. I'm not putting him down. However, I would not recommend a person like that, for example, to learn the language of jazz. And so I use these things. I transcribe solos. I spend time listening to music. And I also dig into other styles of music to help broaden my horizons and my concepts of music in general.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. And, it's interesting that you mention that jazz itself is a language and there are better sources than others that reflect that language overall. And it's so me as more of a crossover, like mainly classical and jazz saxophonist. Um, I think a lot of people, just people out in the world, don't always understand the essence of jazz, like what it truly is in practice. And people, I think, often are drawn to, they think of Kenny G when they think of jazz saxophone. And my way sort of differentiating that style, like Kenny G, Dave Koz, David Sanborn, is I have to kind of make a separate category. Like I would call that more pop saxophone, in my opinion, and like I really try and make sure that I'm capturing, as somebody who wants to teach saxophone students, I want to know about players who really reflect what jazz is. And when I go to teach students in the future, I want to make sure that they have been listening to players like Dexter Gordon, like Lester Young, the list goes on, Charlie Parker, these creators of the language, so that they sort of get the right idea and the right template. So yeah, that's a great comparison that you brought up, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And as there's nothing wrong with listening to Kenny G or Dave Sanborn. I like David Sanborn as well.
Me too. He's got a great
Like you
sound.
said, it's like we call an orange an orange and an apple.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, I think as teachers, we have almost this like responsibility to like differentiate styles for students, because they don't always have like an exact idea of what they want to do. And I know, like, I don't feel like I got the essence of what jazz was until my high school saxophone teacher assigned Johnny Hodges' Prelude to a Kiss for me to transcribe on alto. And I finally started to like get like how jazz musicians learn the language. I had been listening to jazz for years. I loved like John Coltrane, Charlie Parker. John Coltrane has always been my favorite jazz saxophonist, but it was so dazzling to me, his playing and his technique, and I just could not conceptualize how he could have learned to play like that. And once I actually transcribed one of like the early masters of jazz saxophone, I realized, oh, like these people are listening to each other really intently. And imitating and learning. Yeah. So the next question, speaking of influence, who are some of your biggest musical influences?
Wow, there's quite a few of them. I think everybody who has something to say and is unique and honest in their expression is important to me and can have an influence on me, because that's what jazz is all about. But having said that, some of my most important influences are Sidney Bechet, Charlie Parker, Coleman Hawkins, Dexter Gordon, Lester Young, Sonny Rollins, John Coltrane, and even people who don't play saxophone like Thelonious Monk, Art Blakey, James P. Johnson, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Nina Simone is one of my favorites as well. And then I also have strong influences from some artists who are not jazz musicians. Chopin is one of my absolute favorites. And I remember, I was struggling to try to stumble through the Chopin etudes on the piano, doing a horrible job, but still enjoying the experience of learning and discovery. And so I would ask people, who are some of the best pianists who can play Chopin's music? And I had a list of about 4 or 5 artists, and I listened to them all. And of all of them, it seemed to me that Vladimir Horowitz was one of my favorites. So I listened to quite a lot of his performances and interpretations of Chopin's music. I love Paco de Lucia, and also, well, it's actually pronounced Lucia. And I actually did a record with him many years ago in Spain, and I love his music as well. And Django Reinhardt, kind of in a similar type of thing, even though it's early jazz, is an incredible musician who has some influence on me as well.
That's an incredible list, and it's great to hear about musicians who aren't saxophonists having an influence on your saxophone playing, which I think it's definitely something that's important to a lot of different saxophonists across different styles is listening to other instrumentalists. I know in the classical realm, we really like to listen to violin players, cellists, and string quartets. And we've tried to, like, I know a lot of early like classical saxophone tried to mimic like string vibrato and phrasing, and I think the saxophone like behaves similarly to some of those instruments. And it's interesting too. I've noticed when I'm listening to jazz, like obviously I'm very focused on what the saxophone player on the record is doing, but I also I some of my favorite jazz linguists are actually trumpet players, which is funny. I don't even know if I've touched a trumpet in my life, but like Lee Morgan is one of my favorite musicians ever. Like anytime I hear Lee Morgan or Freddie Hubbard play a solo on the trumpet, I'm like all ears. I've also found like there are certain like idioms and phrases trumpet players will play a lot that I've tried to kind of reflect on the saxophone.
Yeah.
The trumpet just has kind of like an energy to it, and it's also very inspiring to listen to jazz records where the players are really really listening to each other, and like will start a solo the same way somebody else ended a solo, for instance.
Oh, yeah, I love that. That's right. That's recognition. That's
Yes.
almost in conversation, and you say like start a solo, end a solo, and then I would continue by saying, so when you speak about starting and ending in solo, and then take it to another place, that's conversation.
Exactly, yeah. And there is such a conversational element to jazz, and um, it's always really inspiring, especially in live settings, to
Yeah,
hear that.
yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned something about the particular way that trumpet players play phrases sometimes. That is interesting, and you can adapt to it and make it your own on the saxophone. And when I think about that, I think about those artists you mentioned, like Freddie Hubbard, Lee Morgan, and such. And I discovered something very interesting. It seems it's maybe it's kind of obvious, but I was kind of dumbfounded when I realized that all instruments that require breath, that you have to play either valves or push buttons, they work mechanically in the same way. So, for example, for a saxophonist, if you use one hand, the left hand, and you play like G, A, B, and C, that type of a finger movement is the same for the three valves on a trumpet. Maybe not the exact same notes, but it's like G, A, B flat, and then the middle finger, which would be C, is like a B, and then C is an open valve. I think that's right. It's kind of interesting how that works. I guess it's because of
Yeah.
engineering thing that is very interesting. I think Coleman Hawkins played the cello. Didn't he play the cello before tenor saxophone?
I don't know, but that could very well be true. I want to look that up now.
Yeah, because the cello is very close to the tenor saxophone. It has such an incredible uh, mode of expression and range that's very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, that's an interesting um thought as well. Like, what would you say? Because I've really connected with the tenor saxophone specifically. Like, what has brought you to be more of a B flat saxophonist, tenor and soprano? Because it's just such a common theme.
Yeah, well, when the first saxophone I got was a C melody, and I played that until we moved to New York, because as I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, and when we moved to New York, Barry Harris gave me an alto, and I started studying with him, and I played alto for a while until I became until I got to high school, and in high school I started playing the tenor, and I stuck with that through college. When I started playing with Cap Calloway, then I expanded to add the clarinet, and at some point I bought a baritone and I loved it, fell in love with it. But the soprano was given to me by a famous photographer named Arthur Elgort, and I was about 19, and he gave me this soprano, And I've been playing it ever since. It's the same horn that you've seen me play, that little curved soprano. And he thought that I would put it to better use than he thought he would, because he wanted to play soprano. So I don't know. I think that the B flat instruments speak to me. Um, the alto is a particular instrument that I can't just pick it up and play it if I haven't been practicing it. It's got a different feeling. Somehow the baritone seems a bit different. I don't know why. But, I just stuck with those B flat instruments, and it was just like that.
Yeah, that's a great story. I know. I remember the first few times I picked up a tenor saxophone, there just seemed to be something different about it. I've
Mm.
always just really enjoyed playing tenor. My next question is, how do you cope with stress in your career and nerves and pressure on stage?
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's a good one. There's no one way, but the way that I deal with it is like this. I used to get really nervous to play in front of people or talk in front of people, and over time I've overcome that nervousness. And I think it's normal for us to have a little bit of excitement or nervousness. It gets the blood flowing, and it gets your adrenaline happening, and sometimes magical things happen when you're doing things spontaneously in front of a live audience. But I think that a few things that really helped me to overcome those difficult challenges is to realize that as I practice and as I'm studying and working on this craft over years of time, I can be able to have confidence in saying that I'm an expert. Or even if I wasn't an expert, I would be good enough to be able to say I have something to say. And there comes, I think, the important balance between confidence and humility. I think one has to be confident. I have confidence in my abilities. And at the same time, I kind of have the checks and balances to remember that I'm not the best, whatever that means, but I'm an individual that has a right to express myself. And with the expertise that I have, I'm able to share. And when I'm playing together with other people, it's just a beautiful experience. The real leader of that experience is the music itself. And when you're honest with yourself and you try your best, you can never really do wrong. It's just a way of looking at things. We can look at things in many different ways. So I think just acceptance, humility, and confidence through practice and serious study has really helped me to overcome nervousness in front of people. And then the other thing that I would do a lot, sometimes I would look at the audience and I would realize that they are there because they want to share the experience. The majority of the people who come to see a show, they come because they want to see something. They want to have a good time, and they want to have something, an experience to remember. And this can be an incredible inspiration for the performer to do as best you can to share that experience. Sometimes people can get caught up in the idea of I'm going to do this. I'm going to show them, or I'm going to, and so you kind of get outside of the moment and you step outside of it and start thinking about how you want to project yourself. And I think that that's a big mistake. I'll tell you a story. I remember when I was living with Roy Hargrove, we used to go out every night and play in New York. We go to jam sessions, we sit in on people's gigs and stuff and just play, 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 play. And I remember a couple of times I would go to this jam session where while people were playing, I was thinking about what I was going to play when it was my turn. I was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try that. Maybe I'll play this song and this, that, and the other. And then when I got up to play, it never worked. And I discovered that it never worked because I wasn't present. Instead of being in the moment and enjoying what was happening, I was somewhere else trying to anticipate what I thought was going to be, and it never worked. But once I started to just accept what was happening and be a part of the moment, it always worked. Almost like if you have a conversation and instead of listening to the other person, you're thinking about what you're going to say, the conversation never goes well. But when you're listening and interacting, then you have a meaningful dialogue. So those things really help me to overcome being nervous.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very great way of looking at it. I think, a lot of performers can relate to that, that want to play a particular idea or play something at a particular level. And once we get on stage, sometimes we're not really there. We're just thinking about what we think should happen on stage as opposed to what is. Yeah.
That's right.
So, another question that I ask in all of these episodes is, from a teacher's perspective, how do you strike the balance between encouragement and criticism while helping students reach their full potential as an artist?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. I think it depends on the students' expectations on what they want to achieve, as well as the teacher's expectations, and then what is really possible. And it's different from person to person. From my experience, I'll give you a couple of different examples. I've had a couple of students who I discovered quickly that they couldn't they couldn't make it. They couldn't do the things that I felt like they should do. And so I found myself in a strange situation where I said, okay, well, now what am I going to do? Right? And I'm not going to fail this student. However, I would be dishonest if I ended up giving this student the misconception that they are at a level where they're able to say, I have this degree in music, and now I'm able to become a professional teacher or performer, and I'm going to do it. Where's the balance? How do you deal with that? So I came to the conclusion that the best thing that I could do is to help the student in that case to just get the most out of the experience and enjoy whatever they learn and whatever they can take from the situation. That seemed to me the best thing. And so, in terms of our levels of understanding our abilities, that's up to each individual. And so, requires encouraging as well as being honest about the level that the student is at requires a combination of being able to push them to a certain extent without hurting them, but also not being dishonest for the sake of, sometimes people are afraid to say anything because they don't want to hurt someone's feelings, or because they have this view or they that view, or they think about this and think about that. Everybody's trying to be politically correct. Well, so that is valid. However, we all, once again, we got to call an apple, or orange, or orange. If you can play, you can play. And if you can't, you can't. So in those cases, sometimes you got to help a musician to say, well, have you ever considered other things? Maybe you might not want to be a professional performer, but you might be able to teach music. Or maybe, you can become a recording engineer or a manager. Or maybe you just continue to play because you love it. And I think that the experience of learning music is something that goes way beyond the scope of music, because as you learn, especially in jazz, when you're learning things like your scales, your arpeggios, playing songs, and improvising, what we're really learning is how to communicate, how to get better in touch with ourselves on a profound level, and how to communicate with other people on a profound level, as well as how to solve problems, how to be a team player, how to assert oneself, how to be an individual. All these different skills that you can learn through music are things that can take you a long way in your journey through life, even if you're not a musician.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. I always find it comforting the amount of skills that music can give you, even just in your everyday life. Musicians value a lot of things like timeliness and accountability and work and study and and friendship and working well with others, so, and like that will help you in any situation, regardless if you're doing something musical or you're just out and about.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I have some just general questions too. what do you like to do outside of music?
Oh, wow. I love to exercise. I love to exercise. I've taken classes on all kinds of different things. And, I'm becoming an, I don't know, it depends on a person's age, what perspective they would consider myself in my life now. But I think at 52, I'm getting a little bit older and I'm trying to keep up, keep active. And those things, it really helps the music too, to do those kind of things. I love exploring and learning new things, not music related as well. Like, going up to the Upper Peninsula and seeing the Great Lakes and walking through the paths and looking at the waterfalls. I've gone skydiving. That was something that helped to overcome my fear and just a new experience that helped me to grow. Things like scuba diving. I don't do that regularly, but I did it once and it was wonderful. I look forward to hopefully the opportunity to do it again and just learning new things. I'm always open to exploring different things. Um, Traveling around the world has given me I've been blessed to be able to do that through music. And I think that one of the benefits of being able to see people from different cultures around the world is to be able to talk to people, to see what they like, what do they do, different traditions and cultures. That some people may do things a little differently, but the end result is the same. Everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be loved. They want to remember things. They want to have experiences. And so I think that aside from practicing and playing music and studying and performing, it's important to live one's life and spending time with friends or family or people that you love. It helps to add to the story that you can share and the things that we have in common, as well as the beauty of our differences.
That's a wonderful answer, and I agree completely. You know, um, it's hard being a musician, and it takes a lot of work, and I think sometimes that work can get overwhelming.
Yeah.
So for me, it's been great to just have some kind of hobby, like have a book to read, have a show to watch. I'm super into fishing, and that's what I do during the summer. Is like when it's a nice day outside, I'll either get up early or go out in the evening and go fishing. And it helps a lot. It like clears your head. It allows you to just like enjoy outdoor spaces and enjoy just life in general outside of your practice room. So yeah.
I've only gone fishing twice in my life, and the first time was really boring, but I was so young and I didn't catch anything. It was a drag. And the second time was very interesting. I caught a little shark and a small stingray. I had to throw them back because the law was that those not fish you in the place where I was you couldn't keep it. But how do you like? So what is it about fishing that you find so interesting?
I don't know. I think it's like exciting, and there's like a certain mystery to it, and like it helps me like appreciate just nature and like the vastness of the world in general. And
Wow.
just I love the idea that like these like creatures are just out there, just like swimming around. And every once in a while, if you go out and you with your rod and reel, you can pull one up. And like this summer, I caught like a 3 foot pike. I caught a really nice smallmouth bass couple weeks ago. And it's like it's such a rewarding feeling to like for just momentarily, hold this creature and put it back and just be like, wow. For whatever reason, it's super exciting for me, and it's like my way of like connecting with nature. But
I like that.
yeah. And another question. So, what are some core values you hold as a person?
Oh yeah. Well, you know, being a human on this planet is is a challenge. We are so imperfect, and we're always striving for perfection. We never reach it, but I think it's the journey that makes life so interesting. That's my thought right now. And the core values that I really hold that I think is important is having a sense of integrity. It's important for me to believe in something. to have a belief about my life, about what I think is right, what I think is wrong. And sometimes those things change as I grow or have different experiences. And I try my best to keep an open mind to change, while at the same time having a conviction, keeping my sense of integrity intact. Many times I find it successful, and sometimes I have challenges, but that's a real important thing for me. The other thing is now here's an interesting aspect, and I'm still learning about this, is learning how to love and not hate. And that's a strange thing because, for example, you might be I might find myself in a situation where maybe somebody might do something to me that I don't like. And so it would be easy for me to say, I hate that, or I don't like this person, or something like that. And so I'm trying to find ways to not really go that route, but to more think of, well, that doesn't vibe with me, or I prefer something else. And sometimes understanding helps, and then sometimes there's no need to understand. You just go your own path. But I think generally I try my best to be a good person and not be a fool, but at the same time not have any sense of resentment. It's a challenge. And I think that if most people would try to do that in their own way, the world would be a much better place. We talk about politics or religion or other things, and people say, I hate this, I hate that, I'm left, I'm right, I'm up, I'm down, I'm gay, I'm straight, I'm black, I'm white, I'm short, I'm tall, I'm a man, I'm a woman. Well, everybody has their own right, but it takes all to make a whole.
That's a beautiful answer. I think, that's a great observation. And I know, I've taken a couple classes with you, and I think we've had similar discussions to this, but just, the effect that positivity can have on the world, on not just music, but life in general. Thank you for listening. This concludes episode 12 of The Well-Rounded Saxophonist, featuring special guest Walter Blanding, professor of jazz saxophone at Michigan State University. The tune you heard in this episode is entitled UMMG, or Upper Manhattan Medical Group, by Billy Strayhorn and Duke Ellington. The incredible rhythm section you heard includes Ethan Frank piano, Dylan Sherman bass, and Brian Allen drums. I'm Owen Robinson, and this has been The Well-Rounded Saxophonist. Thank you for listening, and remember to practice smart and stay healthy.